Thank you. A round of applause, everyone. And now I am going to introduce a man who truly needs no introduction, our very own journalistic warrior, Roland Martin. An award-winning journalist who has been recognized by the NAACP Image Awards, a 4-time winner, in NABJ Journalist of the Year, and has won countless other awards and accolades for his journalistic work on the front lines, telling the important stories that we all need to hear and that are important to our community. So with no further ado, Roland Martin, who will be moderating our discussion this evening.
Hi. All right, testing, 1, 2, 3. You got me?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So how we doing?
Good. Awesome.
All right then. Y'all good?
Yeah.
Just making sure y'all awake. All right. So certainly glad to be here. We're going to do this here. So we're going to start with the far left. Each person can introduce themselves. Then we'll get started with our panel. So Fletch, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm Michael Fletcher. I'm a senior writer with ESPN's Undefeated.
Good evening, I'm Shante Parker. I'm the Special Counsel for New Initiatives at the Innocence Project.
Okay, is there a mic on? That's why I'm doing this. All right, so let's introduce yourself again. I want to make sure your microphone is on.
Sure. Shante Parker. I'm a Special Counsel for New Initiatives at the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
All right, not hearing here clearly, so let's get that worked out. Next person.
Okay.
Next person.
Tia Smith, Executive Producer in charge of production for TV One.
Okay. Next.
I'm Linda Lipson. I represent the American Association for Justice, and we have 20,000 members throughout the country. We're very thrilled that Ben Crump is one of them, and we have many other warriors.
All right then. Next.
I'm Ben Crump, a civil rights lawyer. I have a fantastic time hosting this special program with TV One and Rashawn McDonald.
Third time's a charm.
There we go. There we go.
My name is Shante Parker. I'm a Special Counsel for New Initiatives at the Innocence Project.
My name is Rashawn McDonald. I talked Ben Crump into believing in this idea because I felt it was his brand about dealing with individuals who've been wrongfully accused. I'm a creator, executive producer of the show, and I feel very fortunate to have it airing on TV One.
All right. So I'll throw this first question out. Anyone can answer. Ben, I want you to start first, and then anyone else can jump in. And that is, you get tons of emails, letters from individuals in prison who are in families. I do the same thing. My mailbox is always filled. Every place that I've worked at, all the black newspapers and radio stations. And what happens is, the reality is, as a society, people say, you know what, everybody says they're innocent. Everybody says they're not guilty. But when you look at this case, and you look at so many other cases, the guy who just got out, John Bunn, I think, just last week. I mean, there are any number of cases where people have served 15, 20, 30 years who did not commit the crime. And so, although Mark in this episode said how great our legal system is, it shows that we have a very flawed legal system in this country where prosecutors are loath to actually check things out fully.
I'll go first. I think Roland, being a person who goes in courtrooms all across America, I know Mina Malik is also here. She a Harvard law professor, and she does it in Brooklyn, New York, did it in Brooklyn, New York. It's everywhere, and I believe we've lost our way as a country. Back in 1887, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously said, "I would rather 1,000 guilty men go free rather than have one innocent man go to prison." But it's in reverse almost now, because I submit the easiest thing in the criminal justice system to do is to convict the black or brown person of a crime. I mean, you don't have to have any evidence at all. They fit a description, an innuendo. And so out of the 100,000 people that the Innocence Project believe are in prison completely innocent, Roland, the highest percentage of them are black men. And that is the problem that nobody wants to talk about.
And Linda, we have a resistance in this country to just testing DNA. You've got a case where in California right now, Governor Jerry Brown refuses to test the DNA of a man who they say is innocent. And this is simple. You test it. If it matches, it matches. If it doesn't, now you got a whole different conversation.
Programs like this are so incredibly important because they pass the outrage along, and I think that actually there's social media is actually a hope, because friends and family can get the word out to more and more and more people. And even though it looks like the fact that this took 27 years is a disgrace, but I think I think there are more and more people in this country that care about this issue. That's what I'm feeling. I think the Innocence Project would say that, and so we just have to promote programs like this, get the word out, and make sure that we don't have 4% of all incarcerated individuals innocent in this country fighting this fight.
Shanta, we're seeing. Go ahead, Michael.
I think we also need to sort of hold prosecutors accountable. It's voting. I live in Baltimore City, and we're having a state's attorney election now, and the primary's coming up. And Marilyn Mosby, who became kind of renowned around the Freddie Gray case, is running for re-election. And the big story is, well, what's her conviction rate? I mean, this is the pressure the prosecutors face. It's real life pressure. I get that. I mean, Baltimore's suffering from a real crime problem, and people look at the prosecutor as kind of a key cog in solving crime. Apparently, her conviction rate is something like 92%. Her predecessor's was 95%, and that's something that voters sort of look at. But we also have to look at the other side of the equation, and it takes people who are aware. And I'm willing to bet that turnout in this primary is going to be in the 20s. So that's what happens. And I think we have to sort of fight that.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing that, I mean, look, for 4 years of Washington Watch and then 4 years of News One Now, we constantly talked about the importance of local elections. And I think what we're now seeing is people now realizing it's not just presidential races, congressional races, gubernatorial races, but how critically important the district attorney's race is. You see the sister who was the first black state prosecutor in Florida, who made the announcement that she was not going to prosecute any death penalty cases, which caused a serious uproar in that state. You have, of course, the late Ken Thompson in Brooklyn. You have, of course, Marilyn Mosby there. You have, of course, the DA in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, who was thrown out in the Democratic primary because he refused to prosecute the case of Tamir Rice. You're seeing now Chicago as well, of course, where you had Anita Alvarez, who was thrown out there. Then you're seeing what's happening now even in Sacramento. And so people are now realizing how critically important the district attorney's race is. Shanta, is that a turning point as well? Because even the new DA in Houston is looking at previous cases and realizing that, wait a minute, we can't just say, well, look, we don't want to overturn cases. Right is right, fair is fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that there's more conversation about it. Before I joined the Innocence Project, I was a public defender for about 10 years. And so I saw what we also see from this film and what we see at the Innocence Project, which is that black people are presumed guilty from the start, when you see the police, all the way to your conviction. Even what we see at the Innocence Project is that black folks who are wrongfully convicted have to wait longer to be exonerated than white innocent folks. And so at every stage of the process, black people are having a harder time. And so what we try to do at the Innocence Project is get as many people out as possible, but even those that we've gotten out through DNA exonerations, over 350 people, 60% of those folks are black and brown folks. right? And so what's really I'm excited about is that TV1 is showing this to our community, right? So that our community can see what's going on, what's happening to us, and so that we can be a part of coming out when we have prosecutors up for election and demanding that those prosecutors do right by our community, because for so long, and it's continuing today, we are just really at the bottom of the barrel in a lot of cases in criminal justice.
Was there a particular case that caused you to say, you know what, this show, we should do this show? What caused you to say you wanted to do this?
I wanted to do it because of the fact that when you look at people, it's a motivation show. I want to tell people that the whole basis of this show was, you've seen this show before, but it didn't. I wanted to spin the fact that what would I do if I was in jail 5 years, 10 years? What would my breaking point be? Would I come out and be a happy person, or I'll become a victim of the system? And so when I brought the show to TV1, they basically were going, okay, we've heard this pitch. I said, hold on. But I wanted to be a motivated show. I want to show that the spirit can win out, that it can overcome the odds. And that's what drove me to doing this show, was about overcoming the odds. Because I 27 years, I just look at that show again, I go, really? At 15, I probably was done. You know, I've been telling people I'm innocent, then all of a sudden the guy almost died at year 21 in jail. But it is about the support system. It is about the people around you, the people who want to believe in you. And you, because at one point you're just going to stop believing in yourself, because the odds are stacked up against you every year means another year of I can't get out. So that was the drive for me. I watched these shows on TV, and it became one of those things of, it could happen to me, and also, what would I do? Those are two driving forces of why I wanted this show to be on TV. And since this year, and watching, like every 2 weeks, it's another person being released. You know, the guy at the Chicago White Sox, 31 years, like he can get his old job back. Really? Okay, all right, give me some hot dogs. And that's not fair. And technology's changed. Cars have changed. Clothes have changed. Attitudes have changed. And the fact that in this story that every one of those knuckleheads was still living is a miracle too. Because you know that the system works. One of them had to die. Big Harry was still alive 27 years later. You got to be kidding me. Why was he shot? So those are things about it's miracles. It's the right place at the right time. This situation was the wrong place at the wrong time. And it can happen to anybody in this room. I want you to walk out of the room knowing that it can happen to you.
Tia, what put this one over the top? What TV1 said, we want to show this one.
Exactly what Rashawn said. He came in with that passion and fire. We had heard
She said no.
going down that line, and it was literally the upswing. That's what we called it in our notes. That it needs to stand out. That we give people hope, and again, the resilience of our people to go through this, and again on the upswing, have activity and be able to enter society in the right mind. That was the difference.
If he didn't have a Mia, would he?
Oh my!
Been able to do this?
Exactly. Ride or die.
Ride or die.
But also, let's talk about the fact that for a lot of people, they really don't quite even understand how crazy our legal system is, in that you can find new evidence, but if it's not going through the proper procedure or at the right time, it can't even be considered. Many of us think about the case of Reuben Hurricane Carter, and same thing. In fact, he actually lucked out where a federal judge actually said, no, I'll go ahead and hear it, even though the rules of law said he was not supposed to. And you've had Supreme Court cases where literally folks like the late Justice Scalia pretty much said it doesn't matter if there's innocence, if there's evidence to prove the person didn't do it. If all the procedures were followed, they should stay in prison.
Yeah. Roland, I just simply think, and one of the things when Rashawn and Tia and everybody was talking about it, I just kept passionately saying, people don't understand that the crux of this really is this intellectual justification of discrimination. Mm-hmm. And I would tell Rashawn that go into any courtroom in America, sit in the back of it, and you will see justice is anything but equal. And so we have to acknowledge that they want to justify or legitimate putting black and brown bodies in the prison industrial complex. And now with this administration, I thank God for TV One letting us put a counter narrative out there, because, you know, Jeff Sessions in the Department of Justice is now saying, you know, let's do the most that we can do to put people in prison. So thank God for this show at this time in America.
Anyone can answer this question here. When we look at what is happening in this country with the law, it's very interesting when you're black. I mean, decisions that you have to make in advance of you being accused. I think about years ago, Linnell Jeter, that particular case out of Dallas, Texas, architect. They said he robbed a Kentucky Fried Chicken, wasn't even near the town. CBS made a movie out of it. And I mean, I watched that movie as a teenager, and to this day, one of the many reasons I do not use cash when I travel is that by using my credit card, that serves as a marker as to where I am at a given time. That's one of the reasons why I do it. So I'm like, if anybody accuse me of something, no, I was at this store in this city at this time. I mean, that's the reality of being black in America, where you have to be proactive in case one day you are falsely accused.
And, you know, I think people don't recognize the kind of pressure that comes to bear when someone's accused of a crime. You know, they could come here right now and arrest me and take me in and accuse me of something. And, you know, even though I understand that I'm innocent until proven guilty, really the reverse is true. You have to really prove yourself innocent, particularly when they come at you. I was reading some stats before coming here. Out of the people exonerated in 2015, roughly half of them had pleaded guilty because they were vulnerable, right? They were either looking at really long sentences, you know, or they were really young. They were somehow vulnerable.
It's a hopeless choice. I mean, it's like, we will give you 5 years or 10 years to plead guilty, even though you know you're innocent, or you can go to a jury of your peers and face dying in prison. That's the choice for many of our young people. And, you know, just consider how many brothers and sisters have lied on themselves knowing they were innocent, but they knew the system was stacked against them. That's what this show is about. Trying to tell the truth. My grandmother always taught me, you speak truth to power when you get a chance. Well, you all are the power, and we're going to speak the truth.
And one of the things, I mean, the reality is you don't have even the resources for organizations like the Innocence Project and others to look into so many of these different cases. You know, and again, let's say, okay, all the people who say I didn't do it, fine. Let's say 90% of those people are guilty. You're still dealing with 10% of people who may very well spend their entire life in jail for a crime they didn't commit, and you know, that is just shocking and stunning in a country that supposedly believes in equal under the law, which is right above the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it makes me think of the case, one of our clients, Rodney Roberts, who was recently released a few years ago from New Jersey, who had pled guilty. And he talks about he was charged with a sex offense, and his lawyer says to him, this is what you're charged with, you could go to trial, but the jury's probably going to find you guilty. And he had a young son, and so he said, I'll take the 7 years and I'll be out in time to sort of see my son grow up. And then he was locked into the system, and they kept him in a whole lot longer, I think 18 years.
Wow.
But that's an example of...
So he was 7, but he was in there for 18.
He ended up taking a deal for 7, but then they civilly committed him, right, because of the offense. And so he had to get himself out of that process, right? But it's powerful to hear him talk about, you know, right after arrest, he's in jail. We know that 70% of the people who are in jail right now, pre-trial, can't get out because they can't pay bail. So if you want to get out, and they're offering you something that's going to get you out quickly, most of us, as we said, would probably take that deal. But once you're there, you can get wrapped up, and you know, you lose up a whole lot of your time. So I think we've got to, again, like I said, the system at every turn presumes us guilty and has these mechanisms to try to keep us in.
In one of our episodes with Lisa Roberts, that's exactly what happens, because she's an African-American woman who's openly gay at the time. And this was in the early 1980s. You know, America has progressed a lot with gay and lesbian acceptance, but back then, you know, it wasn't very accepting. And her prosecutor literally, her lawyer literally told her, you're poor, black, and you're gay. You're going to be found guilty if you don't take this plea, and you're going to spend your entire life in prison. And that was the reality that she was dealt with.
Yeah, and again, in her case, I talked a little bit to Lisa before a story I did about this, and she was confronted with, you know, sort of incompetent counsel, or at least, you know, ill-equipped counsel. She was
Competent works, incompetent works.
you know, I mean, the prosecutor had presented them with what they call cell phone evidence, how evidence, placing her in a certain place, and her lawyer was supposed to get that same test done, but couldn't get it done in time. So she didn't have the means to fight. She said, I wasn't there, but how can I prove it? And meanwhile, there are people lined up to testify against her, like we saw here. How do you fight that? And you think the average person who's sitting in a jury, I mean, I think their presumption is that the system somehow works. I mean, they want to believe that.
Are we also seeing more cases also where prosecutors are, not necessarily prosecutors, but also juries are demanding more than just eyewitness testimony? And I know some people, it drives law enforcement folks crazy, but one of the advantages of shows like CSI is that the public has demanded more in terms of forensic evidence, as opposed to, I saw this person, but then you have no weapon, no fingerprints, nothing else to tie a person to the crime.
Well, I'll just say that's the hope of this show, that it will affect the hearts and minds of prospective future jurors. However, I will say, as we were just having a moment, Roland being on the front line, you know, 45 is president for a reason. And these juries are coming in here, when they see black and brown faces, they fold their arms on us.
And add to that, the vast majority of cases, you know, end up plea bargain, right?
95% of cases
so they don't see
end up in a plea.
It matters what President Obama and I think Eric Holder was doing when the message was coming from the top down, saying, no, we want diversion, we want to encourage people to try to find redeeming qualities, which is the opposite now. What you say, Linda?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this meanness is so pervasive with this administration. And, you know, one of our biggest challenges is to turn around, you know, the midterm funk that everybody gets into, and when people just, that have so much at stake that just don't go to the polls. So we're incredibly committed to making sure all communities throughout the country that are usually very poor voters come out to the polls and try to turn this around. Because it's a very bad moment we're in right now.
But we also have to deal with another reality, and that is there are people who can be upset, they can be mad, they can be angry with these stories. But if we really want to be honest, how many people, even folks sitting in this audience, how many of us kill ourselves to get out of jury duty? How many folks, I mean, it is as if it's as if you're going to jail if you somehow you have to go on the jury. And so we have to recognize, when you say a jury of your peers, a lot of people want to get out, don't want to return the summons, don't want to show up, come up with excuses, but then we get mad when somebody is wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
I mean, there are barriers to jury duty, right? If you work an hourly job, then you can't take off and get paid for that, right? So yes, of course, you don't want to miss out on a day's pay. If it's a longer trial, that's weeks you're missing out on. And when people come in for jury duty, the prosecutor is very aggressive in trying to get our people off. And so there are things that give me hope. For example, there's something called the Juror Project. A public defender in New Orleans started this project to sort of inform people about what it means to be on a jury, your responsibility. And so trying to encourage people to take that seriously and be a part of juries, because as you said, it's jurors of our peers, but we have to just give that education and have people understand how important it is to be on a jury.
You know, I would say this, Roland, that because so many cases are played out, that people just don't know how many us are going to jail. You know, it's not being played out. It's being played out behind doors, closed doors, and so it really goes. This show, the purpose of this show and hopefully other shows, are to tell you that it's happening, and it's happening at a very alarming rate. It creates this conversation. That's why it's important to have this screening here, to have individuals, the media here, to just get the story out, just to show. It's on TV, it is entertainment, but it also is information that we need to be aware of. And being a part of jury duty, you don't know that you can be a game changer because you don't know these numbers. The deal is now is to start telling people the reality, the numbers, that the prison system is a money-making system. Is that the pleas, how many people plea out, that they don't even go to trial. They just go, I'm guilty. How many years you got? 2 years, or 7 years, or 10 years versus 50 years is the threat. You're going to plea out. So that doesn't get out. And then you just don't know. I think it's just information you don't know prevents us from being shocked, from being stunned. What we are stunned about is when somebody gets out of jail. Wow! And it's just one person. Not knowing that it's thousands of them just like that behind jail. He just happened to get out.
And Ben, we also have to, I think we have to look at the fact that when we talk about how this happens, you have multiple layers here. Right. Because the reality is the prosecution should be the end of the process. So when the prosecution refuses to turn over information, hides information, destroys information, that's the end of a process. But before you even get to the prosecutor, you're talking about police. Again, I mentioned the case of the gentleman, Bun, out of New York, spent 17 years. The cop who was responsible for arresting him, 17 of his cases have been overturned. And he still is getting his pension. He says, I did nothing wrong. And so to change this is not just a question of dealing with DAs. You also have to deal with what's happening on police departments, where you have quotas to arrest people, to throw people in, forced confessions beaten out of people as well. So you have two aspects of the legal system at play here. Go ahead.
Which is juror bias, which is a big problem. Jurors are prone to be in favor of the police. We have courses throughout the country teaching lawyers how to deal with juror bias, because it's in every state in the country.
And before I address that, Roland, I want to take a point of personal privilege as the star of the show to just bring this point home. We all probably know somebody who's in prison who we believe is innocent, and now thanks to the good work of Innocence Projects, Interior Ministries, and others, Equal Justice Initiative, we are knowing people who have been exonerated. If you're in a crowd of about 100 black people, they say there's a good chance now that one of them have been exonerated from a wrongful conviction. So there's a young man here with us today who was wrongfully convicted and exonerated. Could you stand up and just introduce yourself? Wow.
Actually, hold on one second.
Wow. Yeah.
Actually, do this here. Come down here because we're also live streaming this to all of my social media platforms and TV One as well. So testing 1, 2. All right, so we can hand the microphone to him.
And it was so deep as he come down, Roland. He saw me back and he said, "I love you, man, for what you're doing because I'm one of these people who you're talking about."
Tell us your name, where you're from, and your story.
Wow. My name is Kimon Majid. I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. I moved from Trenton to North Carolina, Virginia first, then to North Carolina. First of all, not a public speaker. But long story short, I'd never been convicted in my life. I didn't say I didn't do anything wrong. I said I'd never been convicted.
Okay.
I never had a record. And when I got to Virginia, all that changed. I just want to say that if you are of color, if you're a man of color, and you wind up in the court system and you don't have a record, there's a high chance that you won't leave that way.
Yeah.
Even if you're convicted, and they let you leave that day, you still have that mark on you. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to leave that day. I wound up doing 3.5 years for a crime that I did not commit. I didn't have a support system, much like this guy. My ex-wife, who married me in prison, deserted me right after the marriage. So I don't even know what I'm supposed to say, bro. It's hard.
So, question. So, you served 3.5 years? First of all, did you serve those 3.5 years, or were you released as a result of you not committing the crime?
I was not exonerated. I was given 15 years. And again, I was given an option. I could go before my peers and never leave, or I could get the 15 years and do 3.5.
What was the charge?
The charge was aggravated sexual battery. And just like this guy, my wife, who was my fiance at the time, I'll never forget this date. It was May 18th. That was a Monday, 2007. That's when I was convicted.
That's
She
only to murder.
got on the stand and testified that I was with her that day. It's a Monday. She's a hairdresser, just like this lady. Most hairdressers are closed on Monday.
Right.
We spent that entire day together. She got on the stand, testified, and meant nothing. The prosecuting attorney in the middle of the trial, stood up and said to the judge that we don't have any physical evidence to convict this guy of this crime. The judge said, overruled. You cannot convict on the lesser charge if you dismiss the greater charge.
Yeah.
And they overruled.
So they had no evidence.
No evidence. No physical
of aggravated sexual assault.
Absolutely.
And it was just based upon testimony?
Based upon testimony of a person who, from what I understand, wasn't even in that state. I wasn't in that state. I was in North Carolina. It was supposedly had happened in Virginia. Wow. And I had a witness that stood on the stand and said that I was in North Carolina with her. And I remember it was a rainy day. And when he sentenced me, I could do nothing but look outside and look at the rain. But I'm not complaining. I'm not mad. I'm not upset. I don't know how. I didn't do 27 years. I did 3.5. That's too much for me. I'm a free spirit. I don't do cages. So.
But you served 3.5 years.
Absolutely.
That you had to register as a sex offender.
Absolutely.
And that still is with you today.
God is good. I moved from Virginia to New Jersey. They moved me down to a class 1, which now I don't have to register. In Virginia, the entire time I was in Virginia, it's crazy. They kept me at a level 5, high risk. Okay. The day I got to New Jersey, which was 15 years later, they immediately moved me down to a level 1. So you don't have to register.
New Jersey is being very progressive. I want to thank you. I don't want to keep you up here, but what you said to me touched me over in that room,
brother,
man.
I don't know if anybody noticed. This is the first day I've ever met you. Honestly, no offense, this is the first day I've ever heard of you. You understand? So I'm saying a friend of mine invited me. You understand? So I didn't know what this was about. I showed up because I have a magazine, BKQ magazine, and I work with a video production company, and we do movies, and I do things progressive. I'm a productive individual. Didn't matter in Virginia. Didn't matter in the system. So I appreciate it. I'm not a public speaker.
No,
all good.
you're
You
fine,
just
man. And Roland, just to quickly address your question, the police, they're the front line of the charge. If they profile you, whether it's, Michael Brown in Ferguson, or whether it's, Alton Sterling in Louisiana, they're the first line. And then the system, to me, for the lawyers in the room, this seems to set up that we're going to take the police narrative as the gospel. The prosecutors, the police unions, everything falls in line. And you got these guys out here who, for whatever reason, became police officers. Hopefully some of them became police officers for good reasons, but some of them became police officers because they wanted to be bullies. But those are the people, and I call them bullies because we do the depositions in court, and they literally try to bully you too.
Well, first of all, we just saw a change in Georgia state law. In Georgia's, for all of these years, in Georgia, they allowed, even in the case where a police officer was accused of misconduct, was going to the grand jury, the police officer was allowed to sit in the grand jury proceedings, which is absolutely unheard of in America. They were allowed to sit in the grand jury proceedings and listen to grand jury testimony, and folks said they could literally intimidate people as in the grand jury. Normally, first of all, I've never had to testify, but I've covered enough cases. You can't even bring your lawyer into the grand jury.
Yeah.
The cop could sit in. There was a special law. They just changed it last year or 15 months ago, where now a cop cannot sit in the grand jury.
You know, they changed the rules. I mean, it's just, they turn them, when it's us as the victims. I just have to say this. Michael Brown, y'all remember, they let that police officer who killed this unarmed black teenager testify in the grand jury for 3 hours, even though when there was a black man who was charged of a crime, said, I didn't do it. He wanted to be in the grand jury proceeding. And Roland, we talked about this on your show. They would not let him do it. He spent 7 years in prison, and then when the Innocence Project got him out, he sued the prosecutor's office. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and Justice Scalia ruled that, hold on, the grand jury ain't the time when you talk about exculpatory evidence or plead your innocence. That time is for trial. And so you kicked out of court. No, you don't get anything for being in prison for 7 years. That's just a bad technical procedure. But then when you come to Michael Brown, it reversed it on its head. It let the police officer come and offer exculpatory evidence, say he was innocent and everything. And that's what you see when you start talking about Mina and us at the Harvard Law people, talking about the intellectual justification of discrimination. It happens every day in courtrooms.
Last point here, what we also, I mean, first of all, Tia, how many episodes of this show?
It's a limited series, so we have 4, but with your support and getting the word out, we are potentially expecting more.
The reason I say that is, Rashawn, earlier you talked about when we hear about somebody being released, people go, oh, wow, that's amazing. But the reality is, most media outlets do not even cover these stories. And so they'll cover somebody getting released. But it's very rare you will see folks invest the time to cover the stories on the front end. I mean, look, I can't tell. I remember we had, there was a gentleman, there was a white gentleman who asked, well, why is it, I watch your show a lot, and you always, you're leading with these police cases. And I'm going, because nobody else is covering them. So if we don't, who the hell else is going to cover them? And I'm trying to explain, and I'm like, there's a reason why black shows and black networks and black media matters, because frankly, and Ben, you can speak to this as well, but Rashawn, I want to go to you. The reality is, if we are not shining light on these type of stories, they're not going to get covered unless they rise to a major story. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is that when these gentlemen, men or women get released, it's always a happy story. Like if they released this story, they released them and said this case and gave you facts about the case and told you that this number is 1,000 or 500 or being released. They never give you the information. They just rely on the happy story. He's out. Be glad he's out. If they gave us the backstory.
Especially when they say, oh, and he's not mad at anybody. Y'all know. 27 years, I'm straight cussing a lot of folks out.
Good. But I'm just letting you know that you're going to be happy. This is a happy story to be out now. You got to ride the happy, because if you be mad, they might throw you back in. So now you better ride that happy a lot longer, you're going to be mad. Now, but I'm just saying is that when you're out, when they write these stories, they don't tell you the whole story. They don't go back and tell you the flaws in the case.
Right,
There's no detail to it. And so the person in the community, it doesn't bother them. It doesn't relate to them. And that's the problem. We hope it goes past 4 episodes. It's all about viewership. This is about entertainment. It's about news. You know, Law and Order, everybody know that little tune because of the fact it's been on for 20-some years. You know, we love for people to learn this stinger because then we feel we will change lives. That's why Big Crump came on board. That's what Tia said, look, let's give this show a shot. Because again, it's tied to people watching the show. It's tied to people understanding the value of the show. And they gave us a shot, and I'm happy. And I thank them.
We got time for questions, and so let's do this here. We got on either side. I got it. Don't worry about this. So that side of the aisle, that side of the aisle. I got the microphone. I don't need you to grab it. I don't need you to hold it. We want questions. We want sermonettes. So who has a question? Who has a question? All right, step out to the side of the aisle here. All right. All right, I got you. What's your name? What's your question?
Millie in the City for DC Nightlife is for Ben Crump.
It's not working. Mike's not working.
Oh, Millie in the City.
Mike is working.
But she's not on here. Did you hear her?
We got it. We got it.
That's a little low.
I got a big mouth. Okay.
Rashawn trying to be the host too.
So, Attorney Crump, my question is, did you talk with the mother extensively at all? I mean, the wife, I'm sorry, because she was amazing. Yes. And I'm just wondering, what was your conversation like with her?
Give my hand. Yes, we got to spend a lot of time with Maya. In fact, Tracy, who's works with Rashawn, and we were on the set, and you got to know these families. And the real thing is that family was a lot like all of us. I mean, his father was a business owner. His mother was a registered nurse. I mean, they were good people. And just like us, he got caught up in the system. And Maya, you know, she was a teenager, Roland, when he went to prison. I mean, she was 19 years old and stuck by him for 27 years. I mean, it's amazing. And so what she said, and Rashawn, I don't know if you remember this, she kept saying it over and over again. I knew Mark was a good man. He was a good father, and I wasn't going to abandon him. She just kept saying that. We had a foundation, is what she would say. And then the boys would say it too. His 3 sons, they were like, no, we knew that we had a father who loved us, and the man who loved us, we didn't believe he would commit this crime. And that was their whole thing that they kept saying. So it matters when you got people who believe in you, and that's why Rashawn and Tia and all those, we concentrated, Roland, on faith and family, because that's the only thing that gets our people through these ordeals.
Yeah.
All right, question? Put your hand down. I got it. I got it. Put your hand behind your back. That's right. Assume the position. All right, come on.
You did it to a drill sergeant. Okay.
I'm the drill sergeant here, don't you? I want me.
All right. I want to say to TV1, the time is always right to do what's right, and you guys definitely got it right. I want to say that this show will be instrumental to those who's advocating for wrongful incarceration and trying to stop solitary confinement. I saw the promotional material, and I saw the story of Richard Miles. Yes. And Richard Miles is connected to Joyce Ann Brown. It was Joyce Ann Brown who made the call. Yeah. His mother came into Joyce Ann Brown's office. She passed away, but she made the call to Satirian Ministries, who had freed her. So you guys could not have picked a better organization to do this, because when it comes to wrongful incarceration, it roughly costs $300,000 per case. Wow. And just as you mentioned with the Innocence Project, you guys have a heavy focus on DNA cases. Satirian Ministry deals with non-DNA cases. And those are the most difficult ones, especially for the women. Yeah. Thank you.
And you might want to, if you look up, a few years ago, Joyce Ann Brown, she died of a heart attack. and she was wrongfully convicted, was released, and I knew Joyce Ann well because she was in Dallas, and was an amazing sister and who really put it on the line for a lot of people who had served time in prison. So you definitely want to look her story up. Come on.
And I don't need a microphone.
Yes, you do. We know you loud.
No,
Come on,
no,
step
I'm
out.
saying-
Step out. Step
What
out.
I'm saying is what Kim didn't tell you all is she worked with Joyce Ann Brown for years because Joyce Ann Brown is a black woman that was incarcerated allegedly for killing some furriers. This woman had an alibi, was at her job working. Kim worked with her for many years, helping her because the cap you talk about that $500,000 is ridiculous. There's no way in the world that you can lose 27 to 30 years and they tell you all you can get is $500,000. Joyce Ann Brown got 0 because, and Kim can probably explain it better. And the other thing is about
Because it's Texas.
right, and about the juries. It's not that blacks don't want to go and be on jury duty. I have actually gone to the court and just sat there because I wanted to see what they were doing. In voir dire, which is what Benjamin Crump does, they will sit up and ask questions that are targeted to black folks where they know you're going to say, oh, do you have anybody in your family who's ever been arrested? Do you have anybody in your family who's ever been charged with murder? Do you know anybody? By the time they do that, the other side is scratching you and knocking you out because they get a certain amount of strikes. Right. So it's not that they don't want to be on the jury. They know when they go in, they're going to be X. Yeah. I've been called twice and they didn't keep me one time because the first thing they said was, anybody in law enforcement, anybody an attorney, you raise your hand and they say you're excused. Yeah. Yeah. So we don't get an opportunity because it's stacked against us when you get in there.
Was it the case out of, was it Georgia, Louisiana, where they were busted for writing the letter of B next to somebody who was black? And they actually kept the notes, and that's how it went all over the Supreme Court. I mean, thank God for dumbass people. They literally wrote a B right next to the name of all the black jurors.
And just like you said, I have a singing group who he knows the people. They were on stage performing, and the police stormed in and told them they were under arrest because there's been a robbery.
Yeah.
They were performing.
And
I know who they are.
I have to say this, Roland, and Roz, and to the National Bar Lawyers, shout out to y'all, some heroes. In Louisiana, and you may remember this, Roland, it was Judge Stewart who left his judicial bench, an NBA member, to run for district attorney in Shreveport, Louisiana, because the DA there said he would not select blacks on the jury in criminal cases. He had a mandate that he wouldn't do it because he said black people vote to exonerate or find people innocent, and he was in the business of prosecuting and putting them in jail. That's what he said.
Yeah. And that DA lost.
Yeah, he lost.
And he lost.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight this compensation issue because it's something that the Innocence Project works on. We have a policy department, so what we try to do is get each state to have laws that compensate folks for being wrongfully incarcerated. We've gotten laws passed, but there's still 15 states where they don't have any compensation laws. Right.
We're supposed to be progressive.
Right. And so when you think about what we can do, that's one of the things that we can do is as we try to make these laws happen, that the community comes out and champions them. We just got one passed in Kansas where they're giving folks $65,000 for every year that they were incarcerated. And it's also retroactive, right? So we had 3 people we had gotten out, but they couldn't get the compensation, they couldn't get services, they couldn't get tuition help, but this law allows them to get that money. So it's really important because as you said, people have nothing, no support.
All right, question.
All right, I got a, hi Ben. In your 4 episodes, will there be one episode where there is not a happy ending? And will there be a continuance? Number 2, we got one judge, and that's God Almighty. And when I die, I'm going to ask him to drop all charges. And I know he's not going to do that. But in your interaction with the judges, do you ever consider trying to put on something called sensitivity training for the judges? Because they seem to not have any remorse in throwing the book at anybody.
Take them to Starbucks.
Well, I'm going to let Rashawn speak, if I can, to the endings about cases, if there was anybody who wasn't happy, who was mad. So, Rashawn, I'll take that
He
first.
can't tell you that answer because that's a storyline.
Okay, I just asked.
Rashawn, I got it for you. He can't tell you the answer. You have to watch the show to find out.
But I will tell you this. I will tell you this is that it's a motivating show, and it's about you, and putting you in a position to think about what would you do in that situation if the police stop you, and it plays out every day in social media, cop cameras. It's so in our face nowadays, and it still tell you that's not what you see. What you see is not really what it is. We should show you some more. Even the little white girl who got beat in the face the other day. They said, well, you play that video a little bit further back, you can see she deserved to get beat in the face. So it really just it's about letting you see stuff from a realistic side. The happy endings that you see when these people get out of jail aren't really happy endings.
Right.
They're sad beginnings.
Yeah.
And to answer your second part of the question, Mickey, the judges, the implicit bias studies, Roland, that the American Bar Association did, and Dean Robertson at George Washington Law School, I know y'all participated. It was deep because these judges, even black judges, they were sentencing people, meaning you all remember this study, and they had video cameras in the courtroom that they knew was going on. They just forgot. They kept them there like the whole year. And you had these judges who you have black people and white people and Hispanic people all have the same fact patterns and everything, but they were sentencing the people of color greater and harsher than the white people. And when they started compiling these statistics and showing them back to the judges, they had this one black judge, I'll never forget, Scott, at the ABA, he honestly admitted, he said, man, I was discriminating against my own people and I didn't realize it because they showed him he was sentencing black people 3 years on average more than he was sentencing white people because it's that implicit bias that you don't even know unless you're constantly working on it, saying, I got to, in my subconscious, society has conditioned me because of the things they put on TV, not TV One, things they put on TV.
Well, keep in mind, you just had another study that came out that showed that Republican-appointed judges also sentence people of color to longer sentences than other people as well. Yeah. So to your point about in terms of judges, something also we have to keep in mind. Unfortunately, in a lot of states, just like DAs, we elect judges. And the problem is when you also elect judges, you have judges who, those are political positions. And so they also are running on convictions. If they find somebody innocent and it becomes a major news story, even though this judge was out of his mind, you look at the judge in California who basically let the Stanford guy pretty much off. Well, they're having a recall. He should be recalled. But you take other cases, that's one of the cases. And again, what we have to remember is that as voters, if you look at how voting patterns, we vote the highest at top of the ticket. President, members of Congress, United States senators and governors. But when you go down the political races, the vote totals drop. And so I'm constantly reminding people you cannot ignore the reality of those judicial races and DA races, because if we're talking criminal justice reform, we're spending a significant amount of time talking about state legislatures, talking about Congress, when actually the fastest way to change the criminal justice system are all those lower positions. So judicial races and DA races. Go ahead.
I just want to say, there's 5.5 months before the election. Senator Mitch McConnell has made it his top priority to put in 30-year-old non-people of color to the federal courts of this nation.
And some of the most grossly unqualified people you've ever seen.
Unqualified ever. Very few of them have ever represented a human being.
Very few have filed even legal briefs.
Right, and you're going to see that Congress isn't going to get a lot done in the next 5.5 months, but they're going to rush all of these judges through. And all these civil rights cases are done at the federal level. Most of them are done
and you also
at the federal
remember
level.
where these judges are.
Really matters.
Also, the appeals courts where they are placing them. North Carolina, Georgia, the Fifth Circuit as well, where if you're talking about Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, that's where they're all going through, and so all of those are critical races. And you saw one of the with I guess Rob Johnson, that was senator out of Wisconsin. He kept a seat open. Was it for 6 years? Was it for 6 years? Would not allow Obama to appoint a federal judge, and then of course he cleared the way, and they completely ignored even the Democratic senator, because what McConnell's even doing, he's even overlooking blue slips. Exactly. Where they allow that, where if you say, look, I put a blue slip in, the rule, he said, look, we're going to ignore blue slips. And so that's why I always say the Democrats get control of the Senate. Let's see how ruthless they will be when it comes to judicial appointments.
And just to put a fine point,
I doubt they will do it, but.
Just one more point. There are 3 justices that are over the age of 80. And so in the next couple years, we're going to see big challenges having to do with the Supreme Court.
But do not ignore local judicial races. Right. Fletcher, I'm going to start with you. Final comment.
Well, I mean, I just want to echo your point. I think we have to get active on the bottom of the ticket. I mean, we talk a lot about race. I live in Baltimore City. I mean, the criminal justice system is such as black, for the most part. But so the voters, people who care about this issue, have to apply pressure. Because otherwise, the narrative becomes, oh, we have a high crime city, we have to have harsh punishment. And people don't see anything in between. So I think other voices need to be heard.
Shanta?
Oh. I knew it was going
yes,
to be.
No, I don't go down the line.
I know, you jumped the line, girl. You wasn't ready.
I don't go down.
Wet her lips or
nothing.
Man.
What I will say is that I think it's really important for us as a community to understand just how oppressive and huge the criminal justice system is. I think it's wonderful that TV One is doing this series so that we can see that innocent people are spending massive amounts of time incarcerated. But this also shows us that it not only affects the person that's incarcerated, it affects their entire family, and particularly women, right? What we know is that 1 in 4 women in this country have someone who's incarcerated, and that goes up to 1 in 2 black women, right? And so those are resources, that's time, that's emotional energy that's being wasted from our communities. So I'm really excited that this is airing to show people what's happening, so that we can just get more involved and advocate to keep our people out of the system.
Tia?
For the month of June, for 4 weeks at 10 p.m. on TV One, we will feature this series. Please support.
First one is June 4th, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. You got to add that to you.
Right. Monday.
Got
Every
Mondays.
Monday.
I got it.
Thank you, bro.
Yes. Gotcha. Rashawn.
First, I want to thank Tracy Logan, my producer. You don't do these shows by yourself. You just get the credit for doing it. But I just want to thank you guys for hearing our story, allowing us on. It does air on Monday night. I'm doing my thing on social media, and know that I won't stop telling these type of stories. This is my mission. I've been doing this all my life. I'm a kind of do-gooder by nature when it comes to the mediums, that whether it's television, film, or social media. It's about positivity, motivation. But I just want to let you guys know that this show is based on the fact that I'm trying to drive home the point that this can happen to you. And if it does happen to you, what will you do? So tell everybody to watch it on Mondays, TV One.
Linda?
Well, so much of what we heard tonight is not available to everyday Americans, and it really feels like folks are just the no-seers. And so I just hope that everybody uses their social media platform to get this message out, because I do think that a lot of people in this country care about this issue. And the more people that know about it, the more we can make some change.
Ben.
Thank you, Roland, for being a great host. Let me say that. I always tell our stories. I'll simply say this. Everybody says about social media. I hope we tell everybody on the Innocence Project to watch, everybody at ESPN, everybody at AJJ, to watch, because that's important. Ratings are going to determine whether we continue to tell these stories. But the real thing I want to say, Tasha and everybody, is Martin Luther King said in his letter from the Birmingham jail, we as moral people have an obligation to oppose injustice when we see it. We are showing you the injustice. We got to do something about it when we see it. He said that you can't just see injustice and look the other way and think that because you don't feel I didn't do it, that's okay. You know, we gotta oppose injustice. So hopefully you'll see the show tonight. You'll go tell 10 people you know to make sure you watch it so you can say, I'm living out the legacy of Martin Luther King. I'm a moral person, and when I saw injustice, I did something about it. Because when you get a chance to speak truth to power, speak truth to power.
Final comment is real simple. You've already heard it a couple of times. I mean, the reality is, in the TV game, it does come down to who watches and who doesn't. That's what decides what gets renewed and what does not. Many folks who saw News 1 now 4 years, there's a reason why you never saw me put Housewives on our show, or most of the reality shows, because I hate most of them. No, I do. And what people have to understand is that we compete against those shows. And so it's very interesting when I hear people say, well, we need this kind of show, this kind of show. Then the question is, well, do folks watch when it's actually presented? And so it's very easy to say, watch a comedy on an award show or watch one of those ratchet shows. But the reality is, shows like this do not stay on the air if folks do not watch. And so that's critically important. So that's why it's important for us to constantly get the word out. That's one of the reasons why when Tasha said, hey, can you moderate this panel? And she lucked up because luckily my Rockets went 7 for 44 on Monday, bricking against the Warriors. Because had they won, they'd be playing tonight and I'd be in Houston right now again. But when she asked me, I said, look, we're also going to live stream it. So we've been streaming it to YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope since we started, because we have to be able to tell our own story. And that's the most important thing. It comes down to narrative. That is, we have to control our narrative and tell our story, because if we don't, and we don't watch, then we're going to be asking somebody else to tell our story. And there's nothing more, I think, detrimental to any community when you have to ask somebody else to tell your story. And so that's something we always have to remember. Now, obviously, this is a black network, and I don't understand why black people have to do raffles at everything. I don't understand.
Somebody gonna win something.
Every banquet you go to is a raffle. White people do not have raffles at everything. It's like, I mean, are there centerpieces we get to take too? Because you know we do that too. All right, so how many of these things am I pulling out?
Yeah.
I'm pulling one out. Okay, all right, got me doing a damn raffle. Okay, this.
Where's some love there? Where's some love there?
So black.
Come on now.
So black. Monica Bowie.
See, she happy. Roland. That's what you want.
Hashtag damn raffle. Which card? How many damn cards you put in there?
Come on, Wayne. And she's a winner. She's a winner.
Put 2 cards in it. Come on.
She won. Okay. There you go. Yeah, Black Panther, Wakanda. Come on now.
I said I was 2 cards. Cheating. I put 2 cards in. All right, again, folks, Monday, June 4th, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. The first episode of Evidence of Innocence on TV1. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You said,
Post, please. Hashtag Evidence of Innocence. Hashtag TV1 and represent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
So, and then